Join me on my first forage of spring. However you want to define when spring starts, I love the arrival of both the 1st of March and the spring equinox later in the month, both lovely milestones after our long winter. I like to kick off spring gently. I'm just picking small handfuls of a small number of things today, so here is my first forage of spring. And I might also show you later what I do with what I find. First of all, good old wild garlic, Allium ursinum. I know it's such a cliche, but I can't not get some of this, can I? I love the flavour, and in early spring, the leaves are at their best. You can smell the leaves even before damaging them, that sharp, garlicky hit, and it's a key way as a beginner of knowing you have the right plant. Smell it. There are a couple of toxic plants that are worth knowing about, but none of them smell of garlic, so if it looks like this and smells of garlic, it will not be anything toxic. Another two visual checks you can do to rule out toxic lookalikes is to check there is just one leaf per stem, because that, as well as the smell, rules out the toxic plant lily of the valley, which is rare in the wild anyway. And then check the veins of the leaf are running in the same direction, down the leaf, in the same direction as the main central vein. That rules out the toxic lords and ladies, which is common and grows in similar areas to wild garlic, sometimes even amongst it, but it looks totally different in shape when it gets a bit more old, unless it's very small and young, in which case it can have a similar shape to a very small young wild garlic leaf, but it does still then have a very different vein structure. You can see here how the veins of lords and ladies go out from the main central vein, and if you hold it up to the light, you'll also see a vein border going round the leaf, something else you don't get with wild garlic. Remember though, none of these toxic plants smell of garlic, so if you are new to wild garlic, just smell every leaf to be sure, and pick leaf by leaf, not in clumps, so that you don't accidentally pick something growing amongst the wild garlic. I pick some of these young healthy leaves and I use them fresh when I get back. I'll show you how later. It's one of the easiest wild foods to start with. Next on my spring foraging list is nettles, Urtica dioica. Probably needs no introduction or for me to tell you how to identify it. There are no toxic lookalikes in the UK, so it is a safe one for beginners, and if it stings you, you've definitely got the right plant. For the record though, the leaves are a deep green or light green if they're very young, sharply serrated. They're arranged in opposite pairs. They have a rough texture with fine stinging hairs on them. They are often heart or lance shaped, tapering to a point, and the upright stem can reach 1.5 meters in extreme cases, but at this time of year they are very short and low to the ground, and this stem too is covered in stinging hairs. The stem is green, but it can tinge purple, and if you look closely or take a cross section of the stem, you will see that it is a square stem. I like seeing nettles with holes in them. It's always a good sign to see a little bit of bug damage, because as someone once said to me, you don't want to worry about the plants with insects on them, you want to worry about the plants without insects on them. The tops are what I'm after today, just the tender new growth, the tops of these young plants. Early in the season they're softer, less fibrous and perfect for things like soup or wilting down as a spinach substitute, but I'm going to use these for a soothing and healthy nettle tea. Wear gloves if you're new or don't want to be stung, but I'm not bothering with gloves today, partly because I'm an idiot, partly because I'm only harvesting a few tops, not loads, partly because I know how to harvest them without getting stung too much, and partly because I'm not that bothered if I do pick up the odd sting anyway. I don't find them too bad on my hands. I think they've just hardened to it over the years. Next, growing amongst the nettles and all sorts of other stuff, we have this plant, which is cleavers, Gallium aperine. Maybe not everyone's first thought in spring, but I love these. And in spring, they're fresh, the nutrition in them will be rising with the longer days and higher sun strength, and when they're young, like these, they have a mild flavour, very mild. Compared to wild garlic, you could even say a bit boring and bland, but pleasant enough flavour, I think. Always reminds me of garden peas or pea shoots, that kind of vibe. The leaves are small and narrow, lance-shaped and arranged in whorls. I kind of mean like a ring formation around the stem, with 6 to 8 leaves per ring. Each leaf has tiny hooked hairs which cling to things like other plants, fur, and of course our clothes, and are what makes the plant sticky. The stem, like nettles, is square and also covered in tiny hooked hairs. It grows upright initially, but when it gets longer and older, it can start growing like a straggling vine, becoming a tangled mass of stems. I'm taking a bunch today of these young short plants to infuse in water to make what I call a spring tonic that's good for the lymphatic system, so good as a detox after winter. Sometimes I just nibble the soft tips of the plants too, or put them in salads. Once it gets tougher and clingier later in the year, I leave it. You can still eat it when it's older, but it does get increasingly bitter and also tougher, and even the hooked hairs that make it sticky can get a little more irritating to the throat when they get older too, if you eat it raw. I rarely bother eating these unless they are young, so it's not often after April that I'm eating these. So all three of these plants that I've got so far are very common, very easy for beginners to identify, and all three are very good for you as well. They feel like medicine as well as food. So if you look over here, I might have to zoom in a bit, we've got some what look like scarlet elfcups. I'll go a bit closer though. Yes, so look here, we have indeed got some scarlet elfcups. Well, they could also be ruby elfcups because these two species are superficially identical without a microscope, but both edible, both lovely to look at, so I'm not too bothered which it is, but it's more likely to be the scarlet elfcup because that's more common. And that shock of the red against the moss, it's a beautiful sight, I think. Scarlet elfcups are most commonly found in damp deciduous woodlands where there is lots of fallen wood because wood is what they grow out of. Winter and early spring is their season. Wooded valleys are great places to look, a bit like where I am now. Sometimes they may have an appearance of growing out of the ground or even like they're half buried in moss, but that's because they often grow from wood that's at least partially or wholly buried in the soil. Personally, I find most of mine on dead or decaying hazel branches. The fruiting body is a bright scarlet red cup, typically 2 to 5 centimetres across, though they can get slightly larger in ideal conditions. When young, they form neat little goblet shapes with the edges curled inwards slightly. With age, these edges open up a little and it becomes more of a shallow cup shape. The edge of the cap, as it matures, becomes wavy, often undulating. The inside of the cup is a vivid red. The underside of this mushroom, which could also be described as the outer surface of the cup, is pale pink to creamy white. The stem is more of an extension of the cup-shaped fruiting body rather than being an obvious, distinctly separate stem. It's about 1 to 3 centimetres long, tapers slightly from top to bottom. It becomes less noticeable as the mushroom matures and the cap becomes more of a shallow cup shape as opposed to the goblet shape of younger ones. It would be very difficult to confuse scarlet elfcups for anything else. If it's cup-shaped, growing from wood, bright red inside, paler on the outside, and you're foraging in late winter or early spring, you're certainly looking at scarlet or ruby elfcups. They're not rare, these mushrooms, but if I only see a small handful in the area that I'm foraging in, I tend to just leave them. But if there are lots, like there are today, I normally take a small handful, as I do quite like to eat them. It's nice to see that spring isn't just about the greens, but sometimes colourful things like this. Anyway, that'll do for now, so let's head home and do something with these things. I'm back home now, and first I'm going to wash the wild garlic, chop it up, put it on some sourdough bread I made, drizzle with some extra virgin olive oil, and enjoy it as a healthy makeshift garlic bread. To make a tea with nettles, I'll rinse the nettles and put them into a jug before pouring some freshly boiled water at a rough ratio of 2 cups of the boiled water to 1 loosely packed cup of nettles. I then let it steep for 5 or 10 minutes and pour it through a sieve lined with muslin cloth. And that's it. I eat the leftover nettles and drink the tea as a healthy herbal tea, which tastes very green and healthy, but pleasant enough without having to add anything, I think. But you can add honey and such like to taste if you want. With the cleavers, I again wash them first, put them in a jug, fill it with water so they are submerged, and leave it for a few hours in the fridge. I normally leave it overnight. Once done, I sieve off the cleavers and drink the liquid, which has a refreshing flavour and is known as a healthy spring tonic. I eat the leftover cleavers in a salad or chuck them in a pesto or something. If you prefer, you can just blitz up the cleavers in the liquid and drink it like that as a smoothie. Finally, I wash the scarlet elf cups and often use a knife to scrape off debris and dirt. They can take some cleaning, but it's worth it. I'm then going to saute the scarlet elf cups just for 2 minutes, as I don't want them to lose their firm texture or shape. And then I fill the cups with some chopped wild garlic that I held back and eat them like canapes. Absolutely delicious.